What is up YouTube, and welcome back to another CZN Chaos Zero Nightmare video. And today I'm going to be showing you guys a tier list for Zero System, specifically at the highest difficulty, which is going to be difficulty 10, and assuming you are playing on Nightmare mode. Now this tier list was made by me and also my Discord community together, so my opinion and also a lot of others' opinions as well. With the long discussion, we've been talking about this tier list for about 4 or 5 days now, and I finally finalized it. So hopefully this helps you guys out in progressing, because some characters will make it a lot easier, and because it's a tier list, of course it is just an opinion. You can use whatever character you want. Honestly, with the characters in this game, there's not really a huge difference in the power levels between the top characters and quote-unquote the bottom ones, which makes this game amazing. So take it with a grain of salt. It's just a tier list. It's not that deep, and it's just my opinion with my Discord community. So the tier list is as follows. You can see it on your screen here. We're getting right into it. We do have 3 separate tiers. The SS tier, these characters are going to be absolutely amazing for pushing into the higher levels, especially when you're trying to unlock higher difficulties. We have the S tier characters. These characters are also very good. However, they will rely a little bit more on epiphanies. They are going to be a little bit less consistent, but in the right team setup, you can make them work almost as well, or if not just as well, as the SS characters. And then the A tier characters, these characters have some glaring weaknesses for chaos. Some of them are amazing outside of it. A good example here would be like Nia and Ray. You guys probably are looking at and wondering how they are not in like the S or SS tier, but they do have some weaknesses for chaos mode. I've tested these characters a lot, so I'll be sharing my experiences with you. So leading off the SS tier, I'm just going to talk about the first 3 characters. So we have Mika, Kalipe, and Veronica. Basically, you have the best healer and stress manager in the game in Mika. Also gives you a ton of AP, so she works in every single comp. Pretty irreplaceable. We have Kalipe, the best AoE shielding hybrid tank. She does pretty much everything besides heal you. Even though she doesn't have dedicated single target, she's absolutely amazing, and she will make pushing your difficulty level up very easy. And then we have Veronica. She's just a slot in sub DPS support for basically any team comp. She has a lot of damage, and she also has a lot of draw, and she doesn't really use any AP, so just makes her very strong. You can pair these 3 together in the same team, and you can just keep pushing the Nightmare difficulties and the Zero System difficulties without any problems. They're all really powerful. Mika herself makes a lot of the other healers and supports weaker, because you pretty much want to bring her into every single high difficulty run, because if you don't, you kind of are crippling yourself, and that's mostly because of the fact that she just does insane healing, and I think kind of a design issue that only one character can really do this. But the biggest strength about her is of course her AP generation, but once you get her to 3 copies, you're going to start healing on every single turn, because you'll see whenever you take stress, you heal for 200%, and you're taking stress every single turn in Nightmare mode, so you're just permanently healing, and her healing numbers are super high. You're going to see when you compare her water barrier or even her source of water to other healers. So if we look at like Nia, for example, if I can find her, you're going to notice that the healing amount is just a lot higher for Mika, and that's mostly because, you know, the other healers will have a secondary effect. But in chaos mode, raw numbers is like the most important thing, because even though it's not a time limited area of content, the boss's damage and the elite's damage ramps up super quickly, and she has one of the best base kits in the game. So those 3 characters I think are the top 3 for chaos pushing. They don't really have that many weaknesses, if at all, and their kits are pretty much just designed to snowball through chaos very easily, and they do not rely on hard to get epiphanies. After that, in the SS tier, we have the 2 main DPSs, I guess the 3 that I think are the strongest for chaos. We have Mei Lin, we have Hugo, and Haru. The reason why these 3 are strong is because right from the get-go, they do so much damage. You'll find that in difficulty 10, especially on Nightmare, the other DPSs, they actually struggle very heavily on the first floor, which sounds kind of weird because it should be easier, but it's mostly because the other DPSs rely on certain epiphanies that they need, or even like the card upgrades. So these 3 don't really require as much setup, which is why we decided that they are the SS DPSs. They do a ton of damage. Their damage is very streamlined, and there's not a lot of RNG in how they do their damage, right? I will say though, there's one caveat. I think the weakest of the three in terms of consistency, not damage, is going to be Hugo. I say this as like a Hugo main, quote unquote main. This character is really strong, but the problem with him in Chaos is, outside of Chaos it's fine because you can use whatever deck, but in Chaos you only have one card from his Hunting Instincts Epiphanies that keeps Outbreak of War. And if you don't hit this one, you're going to find that you struggle a lot on the second floor and a lot of the elites, because if you don't start with it in your hand, Hugo does like no damage. So because of that, that's like one caveat. So I think honestly he's probably the weakest of the three. But outside of that issue, he's absolutely amazing. And then Meilin and Haru, they just do more upfront damage, so they're very, very powerful. Next we have Magna. She's a really good shielder. She's a pretty decent counterattacker. Not nearly as good as Kalipe, but she's pretty solid as a sustain option. There's some really good epiphanies you can get, which makes her do a ton of AoE damage. She's very durable, and she'll make your team super tanky. And she also does some decent single target for a shielder because of her ego skill. So pretty solid option there. And then we have Tressa. Tressa's very good because you can slot her into any single team. She's like a DPS also that can, stack Agony. Her damage is very underrated, especially in Chaos, because you can ramp up Agony very quickly. And her, epiphanies are not really RNG heavy. She has really good, I wouldn't say like any super OP ones, but she has really good ones all around, which makes her an SS character. So next we get into the S tier. So you guys might be looking at some of these characters and thinking they should be SS. I'm going to talk about why they aren't as good as you might think. So the first one is Kayron. So Kayron is pretty solid. He can do damage, he can sustain your team. The only thing is he does ramp up his damage, and even though in Chaos it's kind of okay, in the higher difficulties you don't have as much time to ramp up as you think, and he requires some pretty good epiphanies to actually be pretty strong. So because of that, I do have him in the S tier, but he's still a very solid option, very powerful, and you can of course use him. Next we have Beryl. So Beryl, I was back and forth with my, tier list, whether to put her in SS or S. I think she's absolutely amazing. She's really, really powerful as well. The only thing with her is you mostly want to retain her cards, and even though she can actually do a ton of burst later on, the damage that she does kind of ramps up because of her retain mechanic. So because of this, right, since you want to retain to do more damage, and you want to run her into a retained team with like Orla even, and even with like Haru, I think she's not as good as the other DPSs. However, I will say, if you do have dupes of her, especially if you get to dupe 3, she gets really strong. If you get to dupe 5 at level 4, she gets even more stronger, and then level 6 is absolutely broken. So if you do have high dupes of her, she's definitely SS, but I'm not going to assume that everyone has max dupes because it's so early into the game launch. So we have her in the S tier, but honestly you can put her in SS for sure. Next up we have Cassius. So Cassius is a really powerful character. For Basin, he's like one of the best. The reason why he's not SS and he's S is because his healing is a bit lackluster, and he struggles on the first floor because even though you can draw a lot of cards with some of his epiphanies, if your DPS doesn't get really strong, then you're drawing like weak cards, right? So he's more of a late game build character, but in that late game build, he's absolutely powerful. If you get good RNG, he's absolutely cracked even in Chaos. But for that reason, I'm putting him here. And you're going to see the same issue with a lot of like the drawing healing supports. Even though drawing is good, it relies on your entire team to eventually hit good epiphanies on the run. And also on top of that, it's hard to run them with Mika because you're giving up one of the 3 slots, right? Mika you want to run in pretty much every team, which is kind of a problem with the game. And then the last 2 slots, you need a damage dealer, and ideally after that, you want some sort of support that can shield your team to mitigate damage, because damage mitigation is very important. And Cassius doesn't mitigate damage, he just draws cards for your team, which can make you do a lot more burst. But in terms of consistency, some elites just kill you really, really fast, so shielding is really important, so that's why Cassius is here. Next we have Maribel, pretty solid shielding character. Nothing really much to it though, that's pretty much all she does, she just shields. And yeah, she has some counterattacks as well, but I think in terms of a sustain, she's very underrated, and she's actually very solid. If you are lacking Kalipe Magna and you're really struggling with surviving in Chaos, then you can run her with Mika plus like whatever DPS, and you're going to find your team a lot tankier without giving up too much damage, right? Because she has some counterattacks as well. Next up, we have these two DPSs that is everyone's fan favorite, and I know some people are foaming at the mouth saying, Renoa's SS tier, Ren is SS tier. So I think in the lower difficulties, they're very good. The thing is, in the higher difficulties, they struggle a lot. So Renoa, I play her so much in Chaos mode, and it's really hard to make her work compared to the other DPSs. You can make her work, but there's a lot more RNG. You really need to hit her epiphanies that generate her bullets really early, otherwise you struggle on the first floor heavily. And even if you do hit them, you also need to epiphany them again and upgrade them, because just getting 1 bullet or even like 2 bullets with the flower isn't enough to kill bosses and like elites. So you really rely on just having, you know, certain epiphanies very early. Otherwise you're going to find that you don't have enough damage to kill bosses in time in the higher floors. So pretty RNG heavy. I even have mine at 4 copies, and it's still pretty difficult. I think if you get it to higher copies, especially like the maxed out one, she's probably like god tier, but which DPS isn't going to be god tier at T6, right? So that's the problem with Renoa. The problem with Ren, she's really good as well, but the way she's really good is you want to trim your other characters' attack cards, because if you're only chaining attack cards with her, she does a ton of damage, but you also want to pair her with drawing support so you can draw her attack cards. And the issue with that is the characters she's all synergizes with, they're pretty weak early game in Chaos, so that's why she also is pretty weak, just because of her kit's design. But I will say, in like, you know, Basin and stuff like that, when you have like the endgame decks, Ren and also Renoa are very, very powerful. But yeah, like I said, the biggest problem with Ren is you want to remove cards very early, and you can't guarantee that all the time unless you get into certain events and you find like shops early. So that is Renoa and Ren. Next up, we have Selena. Selena, pretty solid DPS. I think she's very underrated because people think she just works with stuff like Mei Lin, but her passion weakness is pretty good. That's why she synergizes very well with Mei Lin, and her damage is pretty solid as well. She also has a shield and decent tenacity damage, which is pretty cool. But I think she's overall a solid character, but not as good when you don't pair her with Mei Lin. Next up, we have Orla. So I think Orla is like one of the best late game supports in the game. She has a ton of buffs. The thing is, she really needs certain epiphanies to work. If you hit those epiphanies early, or if you pair her with Calipe and like Magna together, then you can make an argument for her for being the SS tier. But like I said, that's a lot of RNG, so Chaos runs are mostly about consistency, because if you lose your Chaos runs, your Zero System runs, you're losing gold. So every time you lose a Zero System run right now on difficulty 10, you're losing 60 stamina worth of gold, which is crazy. So that's why I have to put her in S. I think in the new season content, she's probably going to be one of the best supports because the fights look pretty long. But for Chaos, even though the fights are long, going into that, you know, map with the base deck and relying on epiphanies does hurt her a bit. So next we have the A tier characters. These characters are still decent to use, but they are a lot harder, and you will need to run them in very specific comps. So we're going to talk about Nia first. I know I mentioned her previously a little bit earlier into the video, but the thing with Nia is that she is pretty much the same thing as Cassius, except her drawing is a bit more RNG heavy. The reason why I say this is because you reveal 3 cards with this Nia's Curiosity, which is like her best card in my opinion. With Adagio, you can draw 1, which is also pretty solid, but these are both epiphanies, and if you don't hit them early, you can lose on like the first 2 elites, because her damage is pretty weak, her healing is pretty weak. But when you actually make a good deck with her, I actually have one which I'll show you, just to show you like, you know, how strong she can actually be later on. Like once you make a good deck for her, she's absolutely cracked. I don't know why I'm clicking this. This is not where I'm supposed to go. So if you make a Nia deck where you trim a lot of cards, right, and you have a lot of drawing, she's very powerful. But the problem with her is like she has a lot of like useless cards. Like her Amp Therapy is nice. It does make you do like extra attack and do more damage and heal a bit. But activating this isn't always guaranteed. So not as powerful. You're just mainly using her for drawing, right? Very similar to Cassius, right? Who also wants to draw for you. I think Nia is a bit weaker just because of the fact that she can't draw as aggressively, and her ego skill is harder to use unless you're using something like Renoa. So that's why I have her a little bit lower. I think she's not going to be as impactful in those higher stages. She's a character you kind of want to carry through a run and then just build a really good deck for, and then you can use her in Basin and like the late game content, and she's really, really strong there. So alongside Nia, we had Ray. Ray kind of has like that same issue where she also is kind of just weak in the early floors. She's really good because of this card. You can pair her with 1-cost characters, or you can pair her with Kairon with this Void card damage. But yeah, you do have to hit certain epiphanies. Before you do, she does literally like no damage, and she barely heals. And also, if you do want her to be like honestly usable in the higher stages, you do need her at T2 so that she heals every turn with an attack card. But I think she's okay. She's pretty solid. But there's just better choices, honestly, and it just feels like she just uses a lot of AP to what she wants to do. And you know, you can pair her with Mika plus another DPS in that regard, but why would you not just bring a shielder over her, right? It's just way more sustain, and the shielding characters still do a decent amount of damage, so you don't lose that much damage by running them over Ray. But Ray's a really good support. In Basin, she's pretty much god tier, but in Chaos mode, I did find her to be a little bit worse. These two a little bit worse than the characters above them, especially in terms of support. You could argue like they're on the same level as Orla, so you can put them in A, but it's very, very close. Next, we have Owen. This guy's like an AoE shielding character, but both of his like things that he does well, AoE and shielding, not that good. So he's like a jack of all trades, master of none, but he's like pretty weak in those things that he's supposed to do. So that's why he's an A tier. Luke is also an A tier because his damage is a bit low, not the highest in the game. And then Lucas, pretty decent AoE DPS honestly, but he really synergizes with bullet characters, and the bullet characters are just not that great in Chaos. They're pretty good in Basin. I think Luke is fine in Basin, but in Chaos he just doesn't do enough damage in the early stages. So that's why Lucas is down here, but I can see if another bullet character comes out that's really strong, he can shoot up. And I think the chances of another bullet character coming out is pretty high, because, you know, guns in these types of games in Chaos or Nightmare universe looks pretty, I don't want to say common, but it looks like something that we'll see more of, right? And then last we have Amir. I think she's just the worst character in the game for like everything. They gave us to her for free, and I think it was for a reason, because she's a shielding character, but the biggest problem is she has one shielding skill, and this sucks. It's 100% shield. That's absolutely terrible, right? And the biggest thing is she only has like one shield. She does have like this metallicize where you can do random defense-based damage, but her damage sucks too. So it's like, what does she do, really? Besides, I guess, being eye candy for some other people, right? But you can see like Maribel's shield, even though the 1-cost one is like only very slightly better, the shelter hold gives you a huge shield, and yeah, having bigger shield is always better. And honestly, Amir's shield is very puny and she doesn't really do that much. So I think she definitely needs a buff. And also, like, her ego skill it's whatever, honestly. You can like stack this metallicize and stuff like that, but you lose it when you use it, and then like you gain 3 on the next turn. It's just pretty hard to use compared to something else. Like Maribel's is just a lot better because you just get this huge shield, so you can use it on any single turn. So I think Amir is just like one of the worst characters in the game for Chaos. But that is pretty much the tier list. Like I said, this is for Nightmare mode, level 10, Chaos for Zero System. If you have any other thoughts, let me know in the comments down below. But like I said, it's just my own opinion, and it's something I cooked up with my Discord community for about a week now. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys next video.